Three, two.
Hey guys, this is DJ Talks, episode 17, and today we are going to talk about anxiety. I'm Johnny,
I'm Dan.
and man, I don't want to say that this episode will be different, like I say every other fucking episode, but it's actually like super different this time because usually I guess Dan and I are way more lax and we're trolling a little bit, and the conversation is less serious, but this one is very close to me. And so I got why what was the inspiration, I guess, deciding on this topic? Dan, you approached me about it.
Yeah.
What,
Honestly, I was kind of just scrolling through some things um for me it's pretty difficult to come up with a lot of different topics or at least so many broad topics. So, I take inspiration from links on Google. you know.
oh yeah.
So, I was just scrolling through some stuff and I just remembered us talking and having this type of conversation before, and you opened up that one time about like, and now it's pretty regularly, but you opened up that one time which was really big for you. So, um, I was like, hey, I mean, this is probably a topic that I mean, a lot of people probably have this type or an anxiety disorder in general, but don't know it or are afraid to express it or not express it, afraid to kind of let people know about it. And there's this stigma behind it where, you know, you're uncomfortable and people still have this negative stigma towards this topic itself. So, being able to talk about it and be able to share it with our friends or people on the internet and just kind of saying, hey, there are a lot of people who probably have um, this mental disorder, um, could help people at least open up a little bit more about it and feel a little bit more comfortable with the topic itself. So,
Yeah, and I guess we should
yeah.
also note that some trigger words that will come up during the conversation would include anxiety, depression, insomnia, loneliness. I know those may not sound super serious for some, but for others, I guess if those are topics that you aren't necessarily comfortable with, then I would say that now is a good time to close the video. But if not, if you are okay listening, then Dan and I would like to invite you to, I guess, listen into some of our conversation. And just to preface all of it, I will say that kind of like what Dan was alluding to, I do struggle with very severe anxiety and depression. So we are going to talk a little bit about what it means to have some form of severe anxiety, what it means to have the anxiety that I have, and then from there we'll talk a little bit more about how it affects my life, but also the lives of the people around me. Um, and I guess at the end of it all, we will include, like we promised, we will highlight a couple of questions and comments that we got from our other episodes. So
If we got
um,
any.
I did get one. I did get one.
Okay.
So we will talk a little bit about that. So clearly Dan didn't get one, but I did. So I have
I
one
didn't
question
get
at the
one.
end.
No.
But it'll be a good note to end on because it is a happier question. So um, yeah, I'm ready to go.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we can start off really where just what is anxiety? That's like a really good start point. Let's say, what is it, and then go from there. Right?
I
How would
remember
you
when I was
define
young.
anxiety?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. When I was young, it was described to me as the feeling of being nervous but excited at the same time. And I never really knew what that meant because nervousness and excitement in the same bundle also sounds a little bit like reckless courage. I feel like there was a more positive connotation in that sense where it was more okay to be considered anxious with that definition because it didn't necessarily mean it was bad.
Hmm.
But the way most of us understand what it means to be anxious is just like that perpetual feel of being worried about something and feeling uneasy. I think worrying has a lighter uh it's not as heavy of a word. It's lighter.
Hmm.
It's I don't want to say fluffier, but um it's okay to say that you're worried about something and then to brush it off.
Hmm.
When you talk about anxiety, you people generally take that a little more seriously, and I think that they realize that there are other things associated with that. You usually associate stress with it. You usually associate depression with it. You usually associate more serious feelings that aren't as simple as the idea of worrying about something. And I think when you worry about something, you're generally worried about something specific. You can worry about a lot of things, but if you're worried about a lot of things for an expedited period of time, I think that is kind of a broad definition of what it means to be anxious. Dan, what do you think?
Um, yeah, I mean, you pretty much defined what a very, very well. So when I looked up what anxiety is, it's pretty much a constant fear of something, right? And or a fear of something. Now, anxiety itself is not bad, right? Anxiety itself helps push certain people. Like people get anxious before some type of recital or some type of concert. If you're performing on stage, I bet even like as us gamers, esports in general, people get anxious on stage
Right.
before they perform. That helps push it and elevate some type. Sometimes it's a negative factor, but most of the time it helps push and elevate that person to do more or a little bit extra.
Hmm.
Um, but when it comes to anxiety as a what they would say as a disorder, when it comes to that point, it's pretty much a consistent and constant fear of almost anything, and that's how I was, at least what I think and what I've kind of read and watched on certain YouTube videos about anxiety disorder. And it's not just, oh, in this situation I'm going to get a little bit anxious. No, it is a consistent, constant anxiety and constant fear. And that's when it becomes a disorder. And that's when it becomes something, you know, more.
I think that's a good point. I wouldn't necessarily say that it becomes a disorder the way you kind of described it, but
Okay. Yeah. Mhm.
I can tell that you're alluding to the fact that like that's kind of when it becomes a problem and it's very serious and should be looked into, right?
Right.
That's definitely along the lines of kind of where you're going with that. And I think that you highlighted a really good point. Anxiety itself is not bad. Um, Anxiety alone is almost craved in certain situations, like you said. There is performance anxiety in like being on stage and performing, like you said, in front of tons of people,
Hmm.
or the anxiety to meet some expectations based on whatever it is. There are a lot of reasons why anxiety can be good, and I think that in those situations, it can push you to do things that you may not necessarily be doing normally. It's also kind of the same feeling of like just opening up to somebody, like a potential partner, and kind of asking them out or like letting them know how you feel. That in itself is like a really good form of anxiety where you can almost like um, achieve a different level of bravery and courage from
Hmm.
that. But you're right. I think there comes a point where the biggest thing is a lack of control, because the feeling of being anxious is so strong and so prevalent in one's life that it hangs around. You feel it in almost everything you do, and then it's hard to get a grasp of and to suppress. And I almost hesitate to say that you're trying to suppress it, because it's not like you're trying to like push it down and hide it for a while, but it's also more like you're trying to like tame it, and you're trying to like get it in like a little bubble that you can control,
Hmm.
so it's still there and you don't ignore it,
Yeah.
but it's not in the way of the rest of your life. And I think that that is a huge difference that a lot of people don't necessarily understand, and how severe anxiety can affect somebody.
Okay. When did you, I guess, first kind of feel this feeling
Oh man.
itself, right? Or
uh
consistent? Maybe you may not have known about it. Maybe somebody didn't like describe it to you at that time. But like, when did it kind of start feeling, or from what you remember?
that's a really good question. I I was always really anxious in grade school, actually, when I was like meeting new friends
Hmm.
or when I would like approach my parents about something. I was always really scared. Um, I was a very scared little boy, and
Hmm.
I think I remember I was the only Asian kid in a lot of my classes growing up, so I was always afraid of like not really being able to relate to other people or not being able to have many friends. My parents didn't necessarily understand or adapt well to American culture immediately.
Hmm.
So there was a little bit of anxiety when they would say like, you know, you're not true to your roots and you're not listening to us, you're not being a good kid. But it really began to show up in high school. I think there were moments in grade school where it was like kind of bothersome, but as a child, I don't think that those moments are necessarily worth noting because there are a lot of changes that you go through um going getting through elementary school, then like uh major changes in your personality going through high school, as well as
Hmm.
the physiological changes in terms of like what puberty does to somebody, and
Yeah.
in college where you like grow, like you really shape into an adult. So in high school I really began to notice anxiety when I would do things that put me in a lot of stress, and I almost craved that feeling. There's that feeling that you get when you're like really, really scared about something,
Hmm.
but it's also really excited. I like it's almost like getting butterflies in your stomach. Like I craved that feeling, and I think that it was a feeling that I associate with the idea of excitement, having been taught that being anxious is a combination of being excited but nervous.
Hmm.
And I would say like that feeling of being nervous is okay, but then like I can also like maybe turn that into excitement. But that put a lot of stress in on my body and on my mind. Really good examples of that would be like um, constantly putting myself in situations where I was around girls that I really liked. Putting myself in a lot of performance scenarios. Like I was in my band, I played the piano, or in my concert band in high school, rather I should say. I
Hmm.
played the piano growing up, so I did a lot of performances, and you would think that I was okay with that, and I got used to it, but
Hmm.
I didn't. I also took on a lot of leadership roles, not just in organizations in high school, but then with my friends. So like I always felt that there was a lot of pressure on me all the time. But then I also took a lot of responsibility for those things in that I felt like I had to do it because no one else would, sort of thing. It was like a really weird vigilante type mentality.
Okay.
But that was when I really first noticed it, but didn't address it. I just like was really, I really craved that feeling of having butterflies in my stomach because I felt like it could push me to do greater things that I had not thought of before. Or like I would be able to accomplish things in a way that I may not be able to
Hmm.
without that feeling like rushing through my blood and having that adrenaline. Um,
Right.
but then when we get to college, so wait, were you gonna interject here?
Well, how would you say that? I guess the question that most people may ask, or at least what I would think, is if you have this anxiety, or even would you have defined it? Did it develop, or did it just kind of start in high school? Did you feel like a severe anxiety because you said you craved this, as well as you put yourself into certain situations where you may be even more anxious, right? So how would you say you put yourself into those situations with a severe anxiety, or did this develop as you grew older?
I think in high school
Hmm.
there are a lot of opportunities to forgive and forget, and I think that growing through those experiences was very valuable because I was allowed to make a lot of mistakes, and I did. But I was in a I was in an environment that didn't necessarily offer me a lot of emotional support. I actually think that I lacked a lot of emotional support in that like it was almost the opposite. I think there was a decent amount of emotional abuse from what I had going through high school. Um
Hmm.
I had a lot of problems with my dad growing up, and then my girlfriend at the time gave me a lot, put a lot of stress on me.
Hmm.
It's not to say that I'm blaming her entirely per se, because relationships are two-way streets, and I was clearly a fucking idiot at the time too.
Right.
so I'm sure that I put just as much stress on her, if not more. But um, those are two things that really weighed on me. I think that having been younger and not seeing the world the way the way an adult would, um, I kind of just rolled with it, and I would just seek different ways of dealing with it and trying to be happy and by alternative means. I don't think I would say that the anxiety got worse and developed for sure, but I didn't actually address the problem or do anything about it until college.
Okay.
So
So I guess what happened in college that kind of finally made you realize this was an issue, or what initially kind of kickstarted, hey, you know what, this I need to get something checked.
mhm. There was a year in high school or college that was like brutal to
Hmm.
me. It was horrifying, and in hindsight, it was. I'm really glad that I went through that experience in college, so I would have the tenacity and the strength to carry myself the way I do now. It was really funny actually. I had a conversation earlier today with my manager at Starbucks, and I was telling him about how like I was like a really shitty kid. I was like got sent to the principal's office all the time. I was a huge troublemaker, and he was like, "Then when did you learn how to be so polite?" He said, and I'm
Hmm.
like, "Huh, that's really nice." I didn't think that I was like that polite, but um, I guess I realized that because of this turmoil and because of the stress. So um, I think that was like a really big year where I grew up. It was my sophomore year of college, and a lot of things happened.
Hmm.
My girlfriend of 4 years at the time had been cheating on me for a while, and then eventually left me. Even though like I technically broke it off, but then she was the one to like actually cut the ties, and
Hmm.
that really sucked. Uh, a really close friend of mine was killed, um,
Hmm.
and I really at the time I regretted a lot of how I handled that friendship because I kind of like pushed her away in the last couple of weeks that I was actually talking to her.
Hmm.
Um, I had a really bad relationship with my dad, and my parents were struggling financially a little bit, so it put a lot of stress on me, and that like I didn't really feel like I could go home or like
Right.
feel comfortable at home, but let alone feel like useful because like I'm not making any money.
Hmm.
I was trying to change majors into computer science, but it just seemed like I was just so bad at everything, and I
Hmm.
couldn't like actually succeed. That like it just felt like I wasn't gonna make it out of college. And then
Right.
there was a lot of problems with us, like my social life. I was a part of a student organization where they gave me the responsibility of planning like their biggest event of the year in a dance show, but like I was a horrible person to work with at the time, followed by the fact that a lot of my actual relationships with people were not super good because I was just in this position where like I would literally just always play video games because it was my escape from the rest of the world. But even then, because I was like so mentally torn up that
Hmm.
playing video games made me feel even shittier, especially because they were like online with other people. So that year was really bad for me, and I'm never gonna forget like actually having been stuck in my bedroom for like I want to say like 3 or 4 weeks where I like almost never left. I didn't go to any classes. I would like stay up really late until like 5, 6, or 7 a.m. It was raining a lot. It was really dark. I would like um just sleep through the day and wake up at night and like feel like super garbage.
Hmm.
Um, I wasn't eating well, so it just got really, really bad.
Okay.
And I think that that was when I realized that that was like the spark of knowing that something was wrong. But
So in that case, are you would you say that those situations in sophomore year were some of the causes of worsening this anxiety for you?
mm,
Or was that just
Kind of. I
extra
think like
baggage on top?
there will always be situations where like it worsens like anxiety. Like even now I still get that, but I think
Hmm.
the biggest thing is that like that was just a start of realizing that I had a lot of problems that I need to address, and that wasn't necessarily where I realized I had to like do something about it. I So going through all of that during the academic year, it was really hard to actually um, keep my head afloat and to feel good about anything. So I took some time to like I got a job and I like worked 40 hours a week over the summer after school ended. I barely got out of the semester with like passing grades, but like by the skin of my teeth.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until the following academic year when I was kicked out of school when I realized I had to do something about it. I was barely getting by, and it was clear to all of my friends that something was wrong. The problem was that no one really ever. Mm, I really
Understood.
didn't feel like I had a lot of support from my friends in trying to help me. I think that was something that always really bothered me too. Is just that I saw a lot of my friends like going out of their way for other people, or that they would kind of prioritize taking care of themselves, which they should. But then I was clearly not in a good place, and I guess it was so bad that no one wanted to make me their problem. So um, eventually, I failed, and in hindsight, I'm really glad that I failed. I needed to fail in order to like learn from that and to pick myself back up. But like at the end of my junior year, getting kicked out of school was like one of the most. It wasn't the most horrifying thing ever, but it was like a really big reality check because there was a lot that I needed to prove, not just to the university and my parents, but to myself. Um, and I needed to know that I was able to get through the worst of the worst and to like overcome the troubles that had like come to me before I could even
Hmm.
consider getting help for anything else. Like it became apparent to me that the issues were internal, and but I kept blaming other people for it, and I kept feeling like super alone. I kept feeling like uh the world was like, I guess for lack of a better phrase, the world was out to get me, and that was very clear in how I would always like my mind would always run through different social scenarios in a very unique way where like I'm thinking about how people's body language is spreading themselves to me, or how they would like talk to each other, how they would address each other, but how they wouldn't treat me the same way. And I was constantly alienated that I would also alienate myself.
Hmm.
So getting through the the get kicked out of school part wasn't that hard. It was just a matter of like going to community college and like thinking a lot about like how painful that trip was between like going there and coming back, which was off campus, and then also having to face the reality that like people are going to change how they feel about you when you're at the lowest of lows, and they will look at you differently. I was actually going into my senior year, when I was like at community college, I
Hmm.
was also the president of a really big social org, and you have no idea how many people like would look down on me and like gave me
Hmm.
a hard time because like, wow, the president of of our club is a dumbass because he's like he's a community college for some reason. Like, why the hell is he there? And I had to tell them like, well, I mean, I'm there because of money reasons. Like, I chose to be there. And yeah, technically, I did choose to be there by choosing not to do better academically. But I mean, the fact is, I fucking flunked, and like, I got kicked out because I wasn't performing. I couldn't focus in classes. I couldn't study. I couldn't like, I I I couldn't go to class. Whenever I would wake up to my alarm to get to class on time, I'd run through like a million reasons in my head why I don't need to go to class, and then why I can figure out how to deal with it later. I can get my notes from somebody else. It's not a big deal if I miss this class because it's more important that I sleep because it's better for my health. Um, I can probably email the professor and just let him know something was up. Um, oh, there's nothing really to do anyway. Probably no, probably
Hmm.
there probably isn't going to be anyone that's going to recognize that I'm missing things like that. So like with all of that considered, I think
Hmm.
that there was a lot of missing support, and I had to overcome that in itself and just focus on what I was doing, which was doing really well in community college and in getting back to school. But it
Okay.
wasn't until I was able to get back to university, which I did right away. Like I'm so fucking thankful that like it just worked out to where, um, based on my program and what the university was willing to do for me, that they normally kick people out for a year and then let them back in. But in
Hmm.
my case, I told them that I was dealing with a lot of other major problems, and that I could prove that I could get back sooner. I told them I was reading like self-help books, that I was like looking into medication for whatever it is that's going on, or like seeing a doctor, or
Hmm.
also like just like pulling my life back together and like studying. I'm
Right.
like, my letter to them was just very much like, I'm trying to help myself out, but I have no idea what I'm doing. And they're like, okay, then after a semester, if you do better, you can come back. And I did really well in community college, so I was let back in. That
Okay.
semester was really unique because not only did I continue taking on my leadership role in that social organization, but I also took on a professional role as a consultant. So that was a very different change in my life because it was a lot more stable, and I think it gave me a competitive edge um, in how I presented myself as a student to the university.
Okay.
Um,
So,
as soon as I got well, the story's not done yet, Dan. Don't
oh,
worry.
yeah, go ahead.
I want to make sure I answer the. I
All
don't mean to
right.
keep cutting you off.
No, 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 no.
I know that you're trying to like keep me rounded, but I am like getting to a point that's relevant to your original question. Um,
Okay.
so bear with me. I'm doing this intentionally.
Okay.
Um, so when I got back to the university, I immediately went to get tested for ADHD. Um, I knew that I had a really hard time focusing. I knew that I couldn't really wrap my mind around something for longer, and that for a long time rather, and that um, I began to realize that my peers didn't have the same problem, or like not to the same severity I did. Um, I went into the Disability Resource and Education Services department on campus, and I was like, yeah, like a couple of my past academic advisors and professors recommended that I look into it, because I would tell them how much about like how I can't sleep, how I'm restless, how I can't focus, how it's really difficult for me to um, stay on track with classes. Like reading was like a nightmare because like all the shit was so boring. I didn't want to read it, and then I like it was also hard enough to read it because I couldn't focus.
Hmm.
Um, so I got tested, and 4 weeks later, results came back, and they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, you don't have ADHD, so you're good. You actually have this thing called generalized anxiety disorder." And I'm like, "Okay, so what the hell does that mean?" And it just says that like even though having this form of anxiety is more common than others, it is in fact like something that I would say plagued my life at the time, and still shows up now. It's not something that's ever going to go away, and I think that is something that in the moment I didn't realize I would have to learn how to live with. And I began to realize that there were a lot of there are a lot of things that come into being diagnosed with something like this that would be very relevant in how I carried myself, because that crave the craving for feeling that emotion, or that like scare, like that feeling in my stomach, was gone. I didn't crave that anymore, and I realized that like, so me worrying all the time about my friends and my classes and my social life and my games and my family, none of that's normal.
Hmm.
It's fair to worry about those things, absolutely, but to the degree that I was, to where like I couldn't control it, where it was affecting my health, where like I couldn't sleep because of it, that's really bad. um I don't think people really, even now, I don't think that a lot of my close friends realize like what an impact it has on my life. And I guess like this was all to answer your question about when did I realize I needed to do something about it. And I
Hmm.
think that like going through those 3 years in college, I actually
Hmm.
stayed a fifth year, so there was another academic year after that. But like going through those 3 years, my sophomore, junior, and senior year of college, um, it really put me in a situation where I had to pull myself together, but I felt like I had to do it by myself. And I think that I did it by myself because not only did I not trust any of my friends to help me, but I didn't really go to them. To be fair, a lot of them did admit that they could have done more to reach out to me,
Hmm.
um, and like taking care of me and stuff. But um, I do think that a lot of it does fall on me and how I handle the situation. Obviously, there is the point that like being anxious all the time does take into consideration that you are going to be lonely more often. Um, a common effect of having GAD is that you will find more of your relationships with people getting, I guess, ruined or lost more than others. And I think that um, that comes from a lot of thoughts and a lot of like things that you can't necessarily control in the way you think about the world that affects how you approach those relationships.
Hmm.
And even though some of them are definitely within your grasp to fix, um, it makes it more difficult to do so. And I share that because I probably made it difficult for my friends to approach me, but I guess like getting through that was pretty big, and like learning how to deal with it was like it's probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
Okay. That was a lot more than I thought it would be, actually. You shared much more than I actually expected out of it, but you painted this picture where people can kind of at least now, obviously hindsight always 2020, but now can picture at least what you went through and what you had to kind of struggle through in order to be where you are now, right? And I feel like at least that's one step in the process itself of kind of making anxiety more of a, or even just mental disorders in general, just having the understanding of somebody's situation, it it can, I guess, alleviate or not alleviate the negative stigma behind it, right? Just knowing a person's situation and what they had to go through and can almost force somebody to understand a little bit more, especially if it's happening to a really close friend. Being able to see and visualize and picture that what they had to go through, at least from what I feel like, is really helpful. You know, not only just being able to spread it, but understanding and all that. So overall, it seems like you went through a huge struggle, and this entire struggle kind of sparked when you had to, almost forced you to get some type of help.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point about mental illness being something that's very much frowned upon in society.
Mm-hmm.
As someone that works in a gaming industry, like you hear a lot of jokes about cancer and autism and stuff like that. Um, and you know, it's really easy to just like say that someone's mentally deficient because they like made the wrong play in Overwatch or something. Um, I just think that in general, if I went up to somebody and said I was mentally ill, immediately they have a stigma that I'm less capable,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm stupid, that I'm less of a human being. And people may not realize that is how they like perceive mental illness, but that's the reality of it. And there's also a reason why it's so hard for people like myself, with people with depression, with people who have other things that weigh on them, to actually like open up to people about it. Like you have no idea how difficult it was for me to initially tell my friends like, yeah, this is something that I have to deal with,
Mm-hmm.
and it's gonna forever change how you see me. At least that's how I felt, and that's also like part of the anxiety itself. That's a scary thing. With everything that you do and everything that you present yourself with, the anxiety does have like some factor in it, whether it's like huge or tiny. And if it's tiny, then you're probably in a really good place and you have more control of yourself than in most situations. But most of the time, you're gonna be thinking about how others perceive you, how they feel about you. Um, you're gonna think about their interactions with you, and they're not gonna notice the same things that you notice. That's also not to say that like the struggles that I go through are not. I'm not gonna say that they're better or worse than other people, because everybody goes through different types of problems and they have different effects on them. So like somebody may have gone through something like um that I would consider way less traumatic, but they might have the same effect on them that this anxiety and my experiences does on me. And I
Hmm.
think something that people need to realize is that like um it's okay to have these things, and it's still fine when you can like work past them. I was actually like really touched when the League of Legends casters Irene opened up about his depression and how like he's able to fight it and still be successful. Shax has really bad insomnia, but and she has like bags under her eyes like every other broadcast, but she still like goes up and she still does her job and she's still there. And like they those two people were like huge fucking inspirations to me because it's really so easy, especially in passing, to hear like your peers talk about like you know other people that just like aren't as capable or as good or good enough. So
Hmm.
that's definitely something that weighed on me a lot. And um, even now, I think that most of my friends don't realize like what that means. But at the same time, I don't blame them because it's not something they've ever had to deal with, and it's not like I've had this conversation with every single one of them.
Right.
I think that I think that it's good to open up a dialogue with those who want to support you and who want to take the time to understand. So if they're willing, then they'll listen. Um, if they're people that are close to you, to you and your heart, then maybe they'll do more than that. Maybe they'll call you every now and then to see how you're doing. Maybe they'll make items or like gifts that they found online to be good remedies for
Hmm.
anxiety. Maybe they'll like just ask every now and then like how is that, by the way. I know we don't talk a lot, but like what's going on with how
Hmm.
you well, like how you feeling. Getting through school was like horrifying, Dan. It was like it was actually one of the worst things that I've ever had to do, but like I'm glad that I got through it. Like it's just I don't oh my god. The school
So,
system is not supportive of people who go through these kinds of problems. And like I was also put in a situation where like the medication I was on for a while made worsen my depression. For those that don't know, the depression and anxiety go hand in hand. It's just a matter of how much of which like one of them you have, because the other one will come with it naturally. Um, it also didn't help that I was later diagnosed with insomnia, so that was fun. But uh, yeah, like I know a lot of people will understand this when I say it, but like the school system does not at all support. At least none of my classes ever supported the idea of battling anxiety and depression while being a full-time college student.
it definitely doesn't. And I can easily see that where it just, you do your work, get your grades, get a degree, just keep moving. Um, so going through those experience, at least your experience itself, what can you share about how you, or what you're doing now? What can somebody else do to at least start either getting treated um, or learning kind of how to cope with uh, GAD, this anxiety disorder itself? How do you deal with it? What can you share from your experience that you can kind of impart to our viewers here?
One of the biggest things that I did was I always sought uh, opportunities where I felt valuable. That social org that I mentioned that I was president of for a while and like did other stuff with, I eventually left because the biggest reason being I felt very undersupported and unappreciated. Um, and that's not something that I ever shared at the time
Mhm.
with my peers because I guess it was difficult to like let them know how I felt. But I think that it was also a transformative phase for a lot of my peers being college students, and I'm not gonna hold it against them for how they treated me. Um, I believe that everyone deserves to, have a second chance at some point in their lives, and I'm sure that some of those people who may not have treated me as well, um, might be better friends with me in the future. But like, I honestly felt like such shit. Like,
Mhm.
like I would always tell people like, if you're leader of an organization and you walk into a room full of your peers and none of them greet you or smile when you walk in, there's a major problem. Even if you're not a leader, if you walk into an organization or a community that you're supposed to be a part of, um, you should feel welcome. You should feel invited. You should feel wanted. And I never felt that way. Or rather, I stopped feeling that way very quickly into my term. I just immediately sought out opportunities where I felt valuable. I felt like as a human being, I was capable and I was wanted. Um, so a couple of things that I did was I joined that consulting organization where I knew that I was a good critical thinker, and that's something that I do consider one of my strengths. And being able to take that to a professional level in the business world felt so satisfying. Being able to like say, I put my brain power into producing a product that is helpful for someone else. That felt really good. I actually took a leadership position in in the line of esports,
Mhm.
which is the esports program at U of I. That made me feel really good too. Like I'm in a position where I can actually help you guys. You guys actually trust me, and I feel pretty good about what I'm doing. I felt valued as a human being there. I also um, developed a community on campus, like on the side for fun, with in terms of like trading card games and stuff. That was always
Mhm.
something that I really enjoyed, and I really did like pioneer and establish the consistent game community that exists now. Um, that made me feel like really good. So like I it took me a while to identify this. So it took me like easily, I would say like 2 years to realize like this is from the moment like that really dark period, sophomore year of high school to like into my the end of my fourth year, my senior year, going into my fifth year. That like I needed to stop feeling bad about myself. I needed to only surround myself with people that would support me. Um, and I need to identify who those people were. It took a very long time to do that. But then I also needed to make sure that I pursue those opportunities and I stick with it. It was still really hard, and I still had to like get over a lot of issues that and problems that made it difficult for me to like operate. Like getting out of bed was always like something really difficult, and also being honest about how I felt um, in terms of like my relationship with somebody, because I was even now I'm kind of cynical in like I I overthink and get really worried about whether or not someone actually cares about me. So
Mhm.
that's still something I have to get over now. But like the biggest piece of advice I would give to somebody would be to like find places and people who value you, because I forever felt so alone. Um, and that's probably one of the worst things you could feel as someone with anxiety and depression.
Mhm.
I know that like there's gonna be a lot of people who are gonna feel that way. Like if not all of them. I felt that way for a very long time. I have friends who told me that they dealt with similar problems, and it you're always there's always going to be moments where you do feel pretty alone, but
Mhm.
building the courage and the bravery to reach out to somebody that you know will make you feel valued as a human being is a really big step, and I think that surrounding yourself by people who do that will help a lot.
It also sounds like you're saying that just don't get too comfortable in one situation if it doesn't feel right. So I feel like a lot of people surround themselves in comfortable situations because they've been in it for a long period of time. So this is what they know, and um, you took a step to almost step out of this comfort zone and go and pursue something else. And that almost sounds like it initially sparked this kind of finally I know that I need to surround myself with people who actually care because you took it outside of this organization that you've been a part or you were a part of for um, you know, all of your college career or 4 years of it, right? And you finally stepped out and tried different things and tried new things and you found new people, and then that it sounds like it almost kickstarted some type knowledge or understanding of, oh, this is what I like to feel. So what would you say in regards to that? Do you agree with that, or um, would you say that's close to what you kind of felt being put into different situations and different organizations and in order to kind of understand yourself?
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair to say. It was definitely difficult for me to make the decision to leave that org because um, I spent a lot of time with those people, and I met some of my closest friends there in college, especially when I was young. But then a lot of them eventually graduated. Even the people that I was really good friends with, my year graduated because I stayed the extra year, and they eventually left.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, making the decision to leave was difficult because a lot of my peers were like, "Oh, but I don't see what's wrong with them," and I was like, "You don't understand because you don't see things the way I do. You don't
Right.
feel what I feel, and you don't get treated the way I get treated." So that was really hard, and I think what helped me make the decision was realizing that my time is valuable, and even if I feel worthless, even if I feel so fucking lonely, and I feel like, you know, pebbles stuck in, I feel like pebbles stuck in someone's boots.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are people who actually care about you and actually value you, and if it's not for your sake, for them, you should take care of yourself and continue being happy. Because there are going to be people in your life, even, I mean, maybe this is just me because I can't speak for everybody who like deals with GAD or any form of anxiety or depression. So maybe this is specific to me, but there are like, even when I felt super shitty and even when I didn't feel good about my closest friends, the moment they would ask for help, like I would jump on that. And I was like, yeah, even though like I feel like you weren't that good about like taking care of me or whatever, like I would still go out of my way to help them. And my friends know who they are, and they've recognized that like I have busted my ass to take care of them, and they want to do better to help me out. So like with them, I know that they ask me for help because they trust me enough to help them. And at the same time, they ask me because I know that they would help me if I wanted it to.
Mm-hmm.
They care about me and they value me. So I should at least like if anything, do it for them, and then in the process learn how to make those brave decisions for myself.
Okay. Um,
Family is a pretty big motivator too, I guess.
yeah. Now that this is kind of all over, what are you doing now that you would consider helping with this kind of with anxiety itself? What have you put yourself in now that you're comfortable with? Do you still feel this continuous on a continuous basis? Um, does it flare up every so often? Is it getting better? How would you describe your situation as of right now?
I'm in a pretty good place, Dan. I think that I now that I've graduated and I don't have to be in an environment where I'm under supported and unappreciated, I can do things that I care about and and pursue sharpening the strengths that I already have. I think being a regional coordinator at TESPA puts me in a really good position where I can get really, really good at things I'm already good at, but also learn the technical skills or the other skills that I'm not so good at to support those strengths. And I think that there are a lot of career opportunities there for me to grow, but
Mm-hmm.
um, while it's stressful at times, it's not nearly as bad as what I had to deal with previously because um, I feel like I'm actually like the work is relevant to me and it doesn't feel like I'm being talked at. I'm in control of my growth,
Mm-hmm.
despite having a list of responsibilities given to me by somebody else. with the rest of my time and with the rest of my life, I'm in the process of like really strengthening some of the valuable relationships I have with people in my life.
Hmm.
I think that is difficult to get to everybody that I really care about because I I'm a very emotional person in that I care a lot about somebody if I care about them at all, and I think it's really easy for me to invest myself emotionally in people, more so than others. So it'll be difficult for me to get to everybody that I really care about, especially because they may not feel the same way about me.
Hmm.
But um, aside from my work at Tesla to keep me busy and make me feel valued in a professional sense, I'm I'm working to let people know I still value them and I care about them in my personal life.
All right. Well, any final thoughts on that specifically? Because I feel like that's a good place to kind of end off on that.
Mm,
The anxiety talk. Any type of final thoughts specifically? Disclaimers, disclosures, things like that.
I it probably may have seemed like I went into a lot of detail about a lot of stuff, but I really didn't.
Hmm.
Honestly, like I really did not go into that much detail because it's a very complex topic, and I think that a lot of people, the overwhelming majority of people, um, won't begin to understand what it's like unless you have multiple conversations about it. And I'm really lucky to have close friends and family who are willing to do that and who
Hmm.
are willing to have continuous conversations about what it's like to deal with it and how they can support me. So, um, the last thing I would want to say is that if you are somebody that struggles with anxiety or depression, I really think that it's going to be fucking hard to continuously have conversations with other people about how you feel,
Hmm.
why you feel the way you do, and um, how others can support you, even if you don't know what that looks like immediately. And to those who like don't necessarily deal with this but have friends who do, or
Hmm.
even if you do deal with it but you also have friends that do, um, it's really important that you take the time to actively listen to them and not just like sit around and nod your head. I think if you let them know that you are looking for ways to support them and that you are trying to empathize without really and like while admitting that you may not necessarily understand everything,
Hmm.
um, it'll do more than you realize for that friend.
Okay. Well, I feel like that is a good spot to wrap up our anxiety talk. I'm glad you got a chance to share all of that, and I hope people can, like I said earlier, understand your situation a little more and just understand the situation of somebody with anxiety. Um, and like Johnny said, open up a discussion about it and really go from there. So,
Yeah. I think now we can actually go to the last thing I want to say real quick on that is that's the first time I guess this is like me going public about it. So,
mhm.
um, yeah, um, that's
Hey, it's DJ
yeah,
Talks. It's how we do it, right? No, we.
I guess so. Um,
But yeah, let's go into um, the comment of last week. The one
yeah,
comment that you got, right? So our video last week was our YouTube review video. Um, we kind of discussed a little bit about our experience so far in our podcast so far. Out of the 15, now 16, or 16, now this is the 17th episode. So out of all of those, what we learned pretty much from it. What can we do to better improve it? So we went through that. Johnny here has a comment from one of our either viewers or friends. Um, what was
or
that?
both.
Or both.
So I know he's fine being public. It's my friend Sal, our friend Sal. Um, he's a pretty good friend of ours, and he had a question for us about our episodes. So he said, in the first few months of doing this podcast, what is something the show has achieved that you're surprised by or proud of? And what are you surprised or disappointed by that the show hasn't reached yet? You can go ahead and answer this one first, Dan.
Holy crap. um, when I looked at the view count itself, actually, no, not even that. No. I think what I'm surprised at the most is how consistent we've been, at least. No matter what we have coming up, no matter what we do, we've always found time and put forth this. I mean, we enjoy what we're doing, but it's still something that it's continuous. This is, we're not putting as much into this as possible, but we're putting some good hours into, or at least some time into this. And just, I guess, connecting that, just seeing that there's certain videos that I'm super surprised at, that we hit 100 views on certain ones. So it's like, wow, this is super cool. It makes me super excited because of how consistent we've been, and I'm glad that we can share it, and I'm glad that people have been enjoying it, and I'm surprised that people have actually listened to our videos itself. And then one thing that you said I was disappointed in or sad that we haven't achieved yet. Is that what?
Yeah.
Obviously, the easy answer is just being better equipped in general for our either production or there are certain things that we said we wanted to do, but we just never got either around to it. Like at least in my head, we finally did our intro video, right? Like that finally it's going to be out.
I haven't uploaded it yet still.
It's cool, but
yeah,
by the time this is up, that's going to be up probably. But yeah, I mean, having that, there's a couple of things like maybe an intro and an outro for our videos. I thought about that, but I never really give it too much thought. So I feel like there's a lot of things that we can improve on that I'm very disappointed that haven't taken that step yet. But it's slow. It's a slow progression. So eventually it'll, at least in my opinion, it'll hit. And what about you?
I think for me, two things. The first thing that I'm really surprised by is that we actually have people that really follow us regularly.
Mm-hmm.
I did not expect to have regular viewers. I don't know this for a fact, but they tell me that they watch every episode and they listen. Sal's actually one of them that said that, and it really surprises me because I didn't think that. I'm often told that I'm well spoken. I genuinely don't believe that. I don't think that I'm very good with my words, and I don't think that I present myself as well as I like to. So I'm really surprised that I hear from other people that they really like listening to me because of how smart I sound and shit. I'm like, you're crazy. I don't think I sound that smart. Barack Obama sounds smart. You should listen to that man.
Well, I mean, he has to.
You don't have to sound smart to be president. I'm
true.
just gonna put that
all
out
right,
there.
Very true. Okay. But
anyway,
it was his persona.
Remember, an old friend of mine who I haven't spoken to in months, almost years now, is randomly shared my podcast. I'm like, wow, that's he listens and he thought it was cool enough for him to share because he wanted to put a spotlight on me, and I'm really thankful for that. I don't know if you want to be called out, so I won't call you out, but you know who you are if you're listening. The second thing that really surprised me was that so many people were interested in the video that Dan and I did about dating. That one organically just had a lot of views and a lot of people watched it all the way through. So I thought that was really cool and that was really funny. I think the thing I'm most disappointed by was just the fact that we don't have real branding for the podcast. At this point, we're 4 months in, and I really would have really liked to have a logo and stuff. Obviously, I'm not super.
Hey, you're dissing my logo again, huh?
Sure, yeah. Right, but I don't know. Just a friend that said that she would help out was I'm just a little disappointed um, that it didn't work out as well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just because I did kind of. I guess I would have done the same for her if I could have, and I just thought that maybe this would have been something that she would have been more interested in helping with. But that's okay. I guess that's something that really disappointed me. But um, I am in no position to expect things from other people, no matter what our relationship like and how much I
Mm-hmm.
helped them previously. Um, and I guess I really wish I had a better setup and I had like better production. Like my mic is really inconsistent, so some of you guys hear me like sometimes it sounds really good one day and like shit the other days. I mean, as much as I fucking love like this Harry Potter background, like you know,
I mean, it's
I'd
better
like to have.
than this background that I have nothing on this.
Dude, this is literally my fucking better. Like you see my books from like childhood. You see like up there is like a bunch of like random game stuff. You see a
Mhm.
fucking Harry Potter. You see a fucking like anime doll on my bed over here and like a Pokemon. So it's like this is like goofy as fuck and it just seems like really troll. So I
Hey.
kind of wish that something it was a little more presentable, but just like in general, not just like my room, but
Mhm.
like the entire podcast. I wish it was more presentable, but um I think in the future though, if we continue with this, it'll maintain be like the casualness of
Mhm.
what we want in a pretty chill podcast. We might like up the production quality if like Dan and I happen to have like a couple of dollars you want to throw into it and um we get a decent enough following. We went up to 26 subscribers, so I'm really happy about that. But I mean I know that one of them is you and one of them is me. So but it's
Hey,
still
hey, you know what? That's all we need. We'll
it's
just
still
create
really
5
nice.
more accounts, right?
Right. So um yeah. I hope that answers your question, Sal.
Yeah. So overall, thank you for that question, Sal. Publicly now known. We, well, I'm going to announce that we will be having Sal on our next week's video.
That is true.
So just for those of you who do continuously watch and love Sal himself, the man Sal, we'll give out all his whatever social media stuff he has next week. But thank
Yeah,
you for
but he
that
will be our
question.
first guest on the show, and that'll happen next week when we're probably going to be talking about the League of Legends World Championship Finals,
Yep.
and we're probably also going to do a little more like um, we'll probably do a little more like fanboying about like random stuff, but we'll see
Yep.
where that goes.
So yeah, thank you for that question, Sal. I'm glad somebody did reach out and did comment or question. So for everyone else out there, if you have watched our videos today, especially if you have any comments, questions, anything about it, let us know. We'll keep it anonymous if you want it to be anonymous as well, but we'll at least share some of those comments. On our podcast at the end. So, comments, questions, thoughts, criticisms, things like that. So, like always, subscribe, like the video, everything YouTube related, do the norm, YouTube. But we're glad that you guys got a chance to join in on this conversation. It was a little bit more serious, but we'll go back to our regularly scheduled trolley video next week as well. So, on that note, any last thoughts, Johnny?
Nah, man, you got it. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
See you guys next week.